The court was quiet, but the quiet was not serene. It was tense, oppressive, with judgment hanging in the air unspoken. The air itself seemed to weigh heavily upon all who were seated there, and each tick of the clock looming over the judge's bench seemed louder than necessary. People fidgeted in their seats, waiting for the trial to start, but still there was no appearance of the woman who made it all about herself. Then finally, the great wooden doors groaned open. Everyone's gaze swung round as one. And there she stood. Robyn Brown. She didn't walk in confidently, like one prepared to defend herself. No. She walked slowly, barely avoiding stumbling, her shoulders rolled forward as if supporting a weight too heavy to be borne. Her face was pale, colorless, and her hands shook so hard she clung to her phone as if a lifeline, her fingers tightening around it so hard that her knuckles went white. Gasps washed over the courtroom. Some mouthed, some shook their heads, but all could see it. This was not the face of a woman set to fight. This was the face of a mother's world crumbling. Hours earlier, Robyn had been in another room, one infinitely more frightening than any courtroom. A hospital ward. She had sat beside her son, observing the rhythmic rise and fall of his fragile chest, listening as machines beeped out rhythms that parodied her own heartbeat. Doctors had whispered behind veiled faces, their words fluttering about her like vultures. Critical, fragile, uncertain. A mother could never wish to hear those words. She recalled holding his small hand, telling him, "Stay with me, please. Mommy's here. Don't give up." And yet, for all her son's state, for all the pain in her chest that felt as if it could consume her from the inside out, she had been compelled to leave him, compelled to be here, to stand up for herself against allegations that cut nearly as sharply as the grief of seeing her child in pain. And so there, standing in that courtroom, Robyn resembled a mother waging two wars simultaneously, one for her son's life, and one for her own dignity. She walked to the front, her footsteps reverberating in the chamber, and took a seat next to her attorney. She bowed her head for a moment, and closed her eyes, muttering something softly to herself. Perhaps a prayer in another form. And then she raised her face, her eyes meeting those who had once referred to her as sister-wife. Christine, Meri, Janelle. They sat across from her, all of them together in a way that they hadn't been in years, their eyes on the attack, burning with pain and accusation. And behind them, Cody sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting back and forth between his wives, but never staying long on Robyn. His silence was crushing. The charges were harsh. The other wives accused her of having manipulated Cody, of betraying their trust, of shattering relationships that had stood for decades. They accused her of being not only a wife, but the wrecking ball that had demolished their family. Robyn gulped hard, her throat parched. She wanted to yell, tell them they were mistaken, plead with them to realize, but her voice broke the instant she spoke. "My son fights for life." She breathed softly, her voice barely heard, but heavy enough to fill the room with silence. "But I must struggle for mine in here." The judge leaned forward, the gravity of her words hovering in the air like smoke unwilling to clear. Gasps traveled through the gallery, whispers springing forth at once. Did she say her son's in the hospital? Why is she even here if that's true? Can't this wait? But no, it could not wait. The family had insisted on the hearing. The lawyers had insisted on answers. And Robyn, as battered as she was, had been brought here by the weight of a war in the family. Her eyes darted around the room, catching brief glances at faces. Some gazed at her with pity, others disgust, most curiosity. But none of them really knew what it was like to be sitting in a cold hospital room, watching your child balance on the verge of life and death, and also having to fight off the same people that once vowed to love you. She fidgeted in the seat, her shaking hands grasping her phone once more. She'd not put it down since the hospital. What if the physicians phoned? What if there was a message? What if, as she sat here, her child slipped away from her, and she'd not been able to hold him one final time? Tears welled up in her eyes, clouding her vision. The room tilted, walls closing in, until she compelled herself to blink them away. She couldn't risk breaking. Not yet. Not when so many were waiting for her to show them one vulnerability. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Brown, he said sternly, though not unkind. Do you comprehend the gravity of these proceedings? Robyn nodded weakly. Yes, Your Honor. Do you want a minute to collect yourself? She nodded no. If my son can struggle for his life in a hospital bed, then I can struggle for mine here. Her voice broke once more, but this time it rang out across the room like a challenge. Even those who had arrived prepared to judge her couldn't help but see the stark, agonizing honesty in what she had said. For an instant, the courtroom just hung suspended in that tension. The wives seethed. Cody squirmed. The judge drummed his pen. The audience leaned forward in anticipation of drama. But Robyn's mind was elsewhere. She remained in that hospital room, grasping her son's hand, remembering the weak grip he gave. She could still listen to the beeping of the machines, still sense the odor of sterilization, still feel the nurse's soft but crushing hand upon her shoulder when she said, "You should prepare yourself." And now, instead of being there with him, she was here accused of crimes of the heart, crimes that she professed she never committed. From the first moment it was apparent, this would not be a normal trial. It would be a trial of law, but also of love, betrayal and survival. And as Robyn cried in her seat, her tears falling onto the documents before her, everyone present in that courtroom knew one thing. This was not merely a battle for justice. This was the battle of a mother's life. The quiet that had hung after Robyn's shaking words did not have time to last. Soon, the courtroom was filled with voices, keen, bitter, merciless. It was as though her soft cry concerning her son had lit a fuse to years of pent-up wrath. Christine Brown rose first. She did not view Robyn with pity, nor did she express even the slightest glimmer of softness. Rather, her features were carved with wrenched pain, masked as anger, her voice shaking but firm enough to pierce tension. "You stole our husband away from us," Christine stated, her voice bouncing off the walls of the courtroom. "You became his everything and we were left behind. We sacrificed our lives, our years, our loyalty, and it was thrown away the minute you walked through the door." Her words weren't statements. They were accusations sharp enough to cut. The gallery leaned forward, hanging on every syllable. Meri's voice came next, icy and unwavering. She had always been the most reserved of the wives, but when she spoke now, her voice was as cold as ice. "You faked being a sister to us, Robyn. You met our eyes, you said families to us, but the whole time you were putting walls around Cody, walls we couldn't ever ascend." Each sentence was a cut, reopening wounds that had never really healed. Robyn winced at every word, as if she was getting punched. Janelle stood up, her serenity veiling a tempest roiling beneath. "We don't stand here because of jealousy, Robyn," she spoke sharply. "We stand here because we watched our marriages disintegrate around you, while you stood silently beside Cody. You were made his priority, and we, his wives, his family were left behind." Robyn shook her head violently, the tears streaming down her face. "That is not true," she begged. "That is not me. I never wanted this pain for any of you. All I ever wanted was a safe place to live for my children, a place where they would not feel broken, where they would not feel less." Her voice broke, and she glanced frantically at the judge, then at Cody, still seated in his chair, unmoving, as if he was not sure he dared to take a side. But the courtroom wasn't finished with her yet. Christine's attorney stood up, holding out a timeline. Photos, texts, and proof were lined up for everyone to see. Cody's shift of focus, the sudden removal from the other wives, the favoritism that had developed like a cancer. Each page, each bit of paper, appeared to shout the same thing. Robyn wasn't another wife. She was the wife. Christine's attorney addressed him in the cutting tone of a blade. "This is not about love, Your Honor. This is about manipulation. This is about a woman who entered into a family, and rather than becoming a part of it, set about changing it. Each move she made drew Cody further away from the duties he had towards the rest of his wives." Robyn buried her face in her hands. "No," she wept. "No. I pleaded with him to be fair. I pleaded with him not to forget you all. I cried for you. I struggled for you when he turned his back. But he made his decisions. You can't lay that at my door." The room was tight. The wives sat tight-lipped, arms folded, faces expressionless. The onlookers hushed among themselves. Some nodded in agreement with the wives. Others shook their heads, muttering that Robyn seemed too shattered to be capable of such plots. Meri spoke once more, quieter now, but not less agonized. Do you know what it's like, Robyn, to be invisible in your own marriage? To stay up nights wondering why the man you've loved for decades doesn't look at you anymore, and then to see him smile at you like we never lived. Do you have any idea what that does to a woman? Robyn's head came up. Her tear-streaked face twisted in anguish. Yes, she said quietly. I do, because I felt invisible too. I felt unwanted, unloved, unseen. That's why I came into this family. I thought we could build something different, something where no one felt cast aside. I never wanted to replace you. I wanted to be with you. But her words, as blunt as they were, did not ease the pain. Far from it, they made it deeper. Janelle slapped her hand down on the table, shattering her composure. Then why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you yell louder? Robyn, you knew he was straying away from us. You knew he was picking you. You could have said something. You could have told him to be honest, to love us all equally. I did, Robyn exclaimed, her voice breaking into the air. You have no idea how many nights I pleaded with him. You have no idea how many times I said I didn't want to be the favorite. But what could I do? Chain him at your doorstep. Force his heart to love you when it had already escaped. The words struck like lightning. Others in the courtroom gasped. Others leaned back, flabbergasted. Even Cody's head fell, shame flitting over his face for the first time. The attorneys urged more strongly. You avow innocence, Mrs. Brown, but the record indicates otherwise. The other wives were left in darkness, and you in the light. Whether by design or not, the effect is the same. You wrecked this family. Robyn's body quivered as sobs ripped through her chest. She attempted to speak, but the words knotted in her throat. She held her phone against her chest once more, longing for strength, longing for word from the hospital. And as the allegations mounted higher, the mood in the courtroom changed. It wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about shattered promises, lost years and scars that may never heal. The judge finally held up his hand for quiet. His voice was stern but exhausted. This court will be told the truth, not a battle of emotions. But obviously, this family is broken beyond all recognition. The words hung like dust in the courtroom, heavy and oppressive. Robyn sat, her tears wetting the papers before her. Her son's face seared in her mind. She had arrived in defense of herself, but every accusation was like a hammer to an already shattered heart. And with that, as Christine, Meri, and Janelle glared across the room, Robyn realized something terrifying. This wasn't about her. This wasn't even about Cody. This was about a family that had vowed forever, and was now in court, ripping each other apart, piece by piece. The judge's gavel came down, ringing through the courtroom like thunder. Mrs. Brown, he said sternly, please come forward. The air changed immediately. Everyone moved forward, tension building with each movement Robyn made. She seemed delicate, as if the weight of her body was too much to handle. Her heels echoed on the floor, slow and hesitant, like a drumbeat ticking down to an explosion. When she came to the stand, the bailiff held up a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Robyn's shaking hand went up. Her lips hardly moved when she spoke in a whisper. I do. She settled into the stand, her fingers wrapped around the edges of the wooden podium, so tightly they became ghostly white. The courtroom held its collective breath. But it wasn't out of kindness. It was out of expectation. Everyone wanted to hear what Robyn Brown, the woman accused of destroying the sister wives' empire, had to say. Her voice began as a whisper. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth. Robyn's lawyer cut in sharply. Her gaze rose, brimming with tears. And for the first time, her words flowed with the intensity of years of suppressed anguish. You all believe I wanted this. Her voice broke. You believe I went here, into this family, with some scheme to steal him from you? Do you believe I wanted Meri by herself? Christine broken-hearted, Janelle crying herself to sleep. Do you believe I wanted any of that? Her words hung there, and the silence that followed them was palpable. The judge cleared his throat, attempting to keep order. But Robyn's sobs penetrated like waves against stone. I didn't come here to break things, she went on, weeping freely now. I came here because I believed in family. I believed in love. I believed in all of you. When I married Cody, I thought I was gaining sisters, not competitors. I believed I was taking my kids into a home where they would never experience the hurt that I had as a child. Being unwanted, being left behind. I believed we could be stronger together. Her voice cracked once more, and she buried her face in her hands, for an instant struggling to regain her composure. The judge nodded to her, giving her a moment, but she looked up again nearly at once, her anguish inspiring her words. But instead, what did I discover? She asked bitterly. Jealousy, whispers, stares. I pleaded with Cody to balance his love. I pleaded with him to be fair. I told him, night after night, don't forget them. Don't make me the reason they suffer. Do you believe he heard me? She spun around, meeting Cody's gaze for the first time. Tell them, Cody, tell them about all the times I wept in front of you, pleading with you to love them like you loved me. Tell them how I pleaded. I don't want to be the favorite. Tell them. Cody shifted restlessly in his seat, his jaw clenched. His silence was more condemnatory than any admission. Robyn's chest was heaving. She pounded her hand onto the wooden stand, its crackling making the room jump. But he didn't listen. He chose me. He gave attention to me, and left you all in the dark, and you fault me for it. You think I pulled the strings like some kind of puppet master. Her voice pierced to a scream. I couldn't control his heart. None of us could. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The audience was split. Some found her manipulative. Others found her to be a woman suffocating, under the burden of decisions she never made. Christine's eyes tightened. You didn't try hard enough. Robyn's face contorted with pain. Don't you ever dare tell me that, Christine. Do you know how many nights I spent up crying for all of you? Do you have any idea how guilty I felt when he picked me over you? I pleaded with him to stop. I pleaded with him to go to your houses, to hang out with your kids, to show you the love you deserved. But every time he broke up with me, he came back. Each time I instructed him to love you, he said to me, you're the only one who gets me. What was I to do with that? Her words clung in the air like smoke after flames. The judge regarded her compassionately, but he couldn't help but ask, Mrs. Brown, are you telling me you never encouraged his favoritism? Robyn slammed her head back and forth. No, I never desired to be the favorite. I desired to belong, not to replace. But I was helpless to resist his decisions, and each time he drove you away, I lost too. I lost the sisters I believed I had found. Her tears choked up the courtroom, and for the first time, even Christine's rage wavered. Her lips compressed as though keeping something back, but her eyes shone with unshed tears. Meri, on the other hand, was not so understanding. She leaned forward, her tone biting. And what about us, Robyn? You tell us you cried. You tell us you pleaded with him. But we never once heard you say those words. We saw only you grinning, as we were shattering. Robyn faced her, her face red and puffy from tears. Because I didn't know how to tell you. Every time I tried, I was a trespasser. I was afraid that if I said how guilty I felt, you would despise me all the more. So I just kept quiet. And that silence, it killed me. She dried her tears, attempting to compose herself. Her phone vibrated in her palm, and she jumped, glancing at it for a moment, before she flipped it face down. The courtroom was able to see the terror on her face. Terror that the hospital was calling with news she couldn't possibly hear. I am waging 2 wars, she said softly, now her voice barely above a whisper, almost shattered. One here with all of you, and one at the hospital, with my son. And do you know what hurts me the most? That while he struggles there for his life, I'm here fighting back against those whom I considered family. I don't want to fight you. I never wanted this war. I just wanted love. For me, for my children, for all of us. Her attorney put a soft hand on her shoulder, but Robyn brushed it away. She wasn't done. She jumped up, violating the formality of the court, her body shaking. I could be guilty of a lot of things. Being dumb, being quiet, being scared, but I am not guilty of ruining this family. The truth is, this family was already falling apart before I ever set foot in it. I just happened to be in the way, when it fell apart. The courtroom stilled. Her words sliced through the air, raw and unforgiving. Even the judge looked shaken, struggling to maintain his composure. Cody lowered his head, finally unable to hide his shame. Christine bit her lip. Meri's hands shook, and Janelle closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to block out the truth. Robyn sat down again, her energy exhausted, her tears streaming once more. She held onto her phone, muttering a prayer under her breath. And at that moment, the courtroom wasn't merely a forum of law, it was a war zone of shattered hearts. The courtroom tension had finally built to its climax. Robyn's emotional outburst had shaken the room. Her words still resonated in the air, her cries still imprinted in everyone's mind. The wives sat rigid and mute, their faces conveying a mix of rage, guilt, and fatigue. The judge rapped his pen against the bench, attempting to restore order to a courtroom that had become a battlefield. But then it occurred. The piercing ring of a phone cut through the stillness. Robyn winced, her hand involuntarily grabbing the instrument she had held since entering the courtroom. The ring was a gunshot in the thick silence. All heads swiveled, all hearts froze. It was her cell. The hospital. Her shaking fingers replied. The court so quiet you could hear her quivering breath, as she clamped the telephone to her ear. "Hello?" she breathed, her voice a mere whisper. The ensuing silence was intolerable. Her face paled, her eyes going wide, and her other hand rushed to her mouth, as if to muffle a scream. "No, no." Robyn's body convulsed, her knees weakening as if the weight of the words on the telephone had been too much to carry. The bailiff reached out, catching her before she fell. The judge's gavel banged once. "Mrs. Brown, if you need a moment." But she wasn't hearing. Her weeping ruptured, raw and uncut. "The doctors, they tell us his conditions worsened. They can't tell if he'll survive the night." Gasps filled the room. Even those who'd only come for the drama, to whisper rumors, sat in stunned silence. This wasn't about polygamy anymore. It wasn't about accusation or betrayal. It was about life and death. Christine's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Meri's face, usually unreadable, softened with something almost like compassion. Janelle blinked back tears, her strong composure cracking. Even Cody, who had been quiet until now, stood up, his face twisted with panic. "What? No, no," he stuttered. For the first time, his defenses crumbled. He grasped for Robyn, his hand suspended over her shoulder as if not wanting to touch her but incapable of remaining still. Robyn held the phone to her heart, swaying back and forth as she wept, tears streaming down her face. Her own voice cracked with desperation. "My baby, my beautiful boy. Please God, don't take him away from me." The courtroom was no longer a courtroom. It was a room saturated with sorrow. The judge himself was shaken, his eyes blurring as he took off his glasses and massaged his temples. He cleared his throat, his voice huskier now. "This court recognizes the seriousness of this case. If you want to adjourn, Mrs. Brown, we can." But Robyn interrupted him, her voice cracking but indignant. "No," she banged her hand on the stand, making everyone jump. "If I go now, it will appear as though I'm fleeing. It will appear as though I have something to hide. And I can't have my kids grow up believing their mother tore this family apart. If this is the final battle I ever engage, then I will fight it with my entire heart, for my son, for my kids, for my son." The resolve in her voice conflicted with fury with the tears that flowed down her face. It was the voice of a mother, who was on the verge of shattering, but not quite willing to. The wives sat agog. They had braced themselves for war, for accusations, for defense. They had not braced themselves for this. For a woman standing before them, rent in two between a hospital bed and a courtroom fight. Christine dropped her gaze, her rage for a moment, softened by the vision of Robyn's pain. For one instant, she wasn't a competitor. She was a mother observing another mother's heartbreak. Meri balled up her hands, her face inscrutable. She did not want to hold on to anger, but it went away from her like water. Robyn's pain was too honest, too raw to deny. Janelle wiped at her tears, muttering under her breath, "No child deserves them." The audience murmured, their whispers interwoven through the air. Others shook their heads, visibly moved by the tragedy on stage. Others fidgeted in discomfort, unsure of how to digest the convergence of family betrayal and maternal loss. The judge slouched forward once more, softer now in tone. "Mrs. Brown, I can only imagine what pain you must be enduring. If you prefer, the court can recess for the evening, so that you may remain with your son." Robyn shook her head furiously, her throat raw. "If I leave this room and my son does not survive,
then I will bear the shame that I allowed all of you to typecast me as the villain. I refuse to let that be his recollection of me. I will remain. I will fight. Her words hit like a lightning bolt. They were not defiance, though. Those words were a plea, a declaration, a last-ditch effort to keep her broken world from crumbling entirely. Cody, still behind her, finally spoke up. Your Honor, please. She shouldn't have to do this today. But Robyn faced him, her eyes flashing with an unfamiliar blend of love and anger. Don't speak for me, Cody. You've spoken enough for me in my life. This time, I do it myself. The courtroom was silent once again. Robyn raised her head, tears continuing to flow, but her back straightened with determination. If this is a trial of my heart, then let it be so. My heart is with my son. My heart is with my children. And if caring for them, guarding them, means standing here, accused by those I once called my family, then so be it. But never question my love. Never question my fun. The room was silent. No one was brave enough to speak. Even the wives, who had arrived with their anger honed to knives, saw their weapons blunted by Robyn's shatteredness. And in the silence, one thing stood out painfully. This was no longer simply a battle in the courtroom. This was the disentanglement of love. The collision of loss and betrayal, and the anguished scream of a mother, faced with a choice between justice and the fragile pulse of her child. The air seemed to be in suspended animation. Robyn had stood shaking on the witness stand. Her phone pressed tightly to her breast, as if it contained her very essence. The reverberation of her final words, "Do not ever question my fun," remained suspended in the air, like storm thunder. The judge took a slow breath. His grip on the gavel tightening, he glanced from Robyn to the rest of the room, then to Cody, then back to the packed gallery. For a full minute, it seemed even he didn't have an idea of what to do. This was not a normal case. This was a family ripped apart, hemorrhaging in front of the world. Mrs. Brown, the judge whispered, you've indicated you want to go, and so, we must. But understand this, whatever decision this court reaches today, it will never be as heavy as the love that you feel for your child. That is a reality, no judgment can take away. Robyn's lips trembled, but she nodded, speaking in a whisper. Thank you, Your Honor. The closing arguments. Christine stood up first, her words firm, but her voice softer than they had been during the trial. Your Honor, she started, this is not simply about manipulation or favoritism. This is about years of shattered trust. We, the wives, gave our lives to this family. We shared everything, our homes, our children, our futures. But when Robyn came along, things shifted. Cody shifted, and the rest of us got left behind. Her gaze flashed at Robyn. I don't despise you, Robyn. I really don't. But love never has to come at the expense of destroying everybody else. That's why we're here. That's why we look for justice. Meri trailed behind her, voice bitter but tinged with a sadness that she couldn't help. For decades I was by Cody's side. I believed in this film. But now, I realize what I actually want. An afterthought. And that's because of her. She nodded in the direction of Robyn, shouting over her raised voice. She can say she never intended to steal him away from us, but what they do is louder than anything. She became the center. She became the only one that mattered, and the rest of us became shy. Janelle, on the other hand, paused before she spoke. She looked at Robyn, then at the judge. Your Honor, I disagree with Christine and Meri on many aspects, but I cannot sit here and deny what I just witnessed. That phone call, that terror in Robyn's eyes. No mother should have to bear that type of fear without another woman standing in their corner. Perhaps she did change this family. Perhaps she did drive us apart. But perhaps, just perhaps, Cody's decisions played a larger role in it than hers. I cannot fault her solely. Not anymore. Her words resonated through the room like a fissure in glass. Christine's face turned to her, in horror. Meri's eyes snapped, and Robyn, trembling, tear-smeared, shattered, stared at Janelle, as if she'd just been handed a rose. Then Cody. He pushed back from the table, his fingers splayed against its surface, his jaw clenched, his words shook. Your Honor, I know everybody in this room blames Robyn, and perhaps I allowed that to occur. Perhaps it was simpler for them to despise her than to realize the truth. The truth is, I chose her. I chose to place her first. That was not her agenda. It was mine. If this family would disintegrate, then I am the culprit, not her.
The courtroom gasped. Christine's eyes narrowed. Mary's mouth fell open, and even Janelle leaned back in shock. Robyn's knees buckled again. But this time it wasn't from grief. It was from hearing the words she had been begging for, silently, for years. The judge lifted his hand. Enough. His voice was firm now, echoing against the walls. I have heard enough. The verdict. The silence that ensued was agonizing. All the hearts in the room pounded like drums, anticipating the bang of the gavel that would seal their fate. This court is not here to fix collapsed marriages. The judge replied slowly. It is not here to heal years of betrayal and distrust, but it is here to determine responsibility. After due consideration, this court finds Robyn's nails dug into the wood of the stand. Christine's chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. Mary's lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. Janelle's fingers twisted the edge of her blouse. That Mrs. Robyn Brown is not solely responsible for the breakdown of this family. Gasps echoed. Robyn's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. The judge went on. This court holds that although tensions were created after her entry into the family, final responsibility is with the decisions of Mr. Cody Brown, who did not uphold fairness, oneness, and equal partnership between his wives. Thus, Mrs. Brown can't be held guilty of manipulation alone. This case, as it stands, is dismissed. The gavel came down once. It was over. The aftermath. For a second, no one stirred. The words remained suspended in the air like thick fog. Christine's expression contorted in anger. She glared at Cody, her voice shaking with fury. So that's it? You destroy us. And she gets off scot-free? Cody attempted to speak, but she shook her head and her hand snapped up in warning. Don't. Just don't. She turned and wept openly, storming out of the courtroom. Meri shook her head, eyes glassy with bitterness. All these years I was convinced I was going to get closure. But there isn't any closure. Is there? There's just more pain. She grabbed her things, her movements stiff, and left without saying another thing. Janelle stayed for a second, gazing at Robyn. Her voice was soft but distinct. Take care of your son. That's all that counts now. Then she too departed, her footsteps receding down the corridor. The room gradually drained, and Robyn found herself standing by herself at the stand. Her legs quivered, her hands shaking, her head torn between the relief of the verdict and the pain of her son's state. Cody stepped toward her, his eyes brimming with guilt. Robyn? She shook her head, her voice cracking. Don't you dare. He stood still, his breath rising and falling. I wanted them to know the truth. Robyn's tears were harder. The truth? The truth is that my son is in a hospital bed, fighting to live. And while you were taking sides, I was holding his hand, wishing he would breathe. That's the only truth that counts. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into the chair, holding her phone again. Her fingers shook as she called the hospital. Please, she whispered raggedly. Please tell me he's still alive. The courtroom was almost deserted now. The judge had withdrawn. The bailiff remained standing silently by the door, and the sound of receding footsteps was lost. Robyn pushed the phone against her ear, her face contorting in agony, as she heard the voice on the other end. Her own sobs filled the air, echoing off the chilly walls. She spoke a single last line, that every heart within that courtroom, and every person watching this tale unfold, would never ever forget. If love is a crime, then I am guilty. And so, the courtroom lights went down, the Ged's shill still ringing in memory, and the tale of Robyn Brown, wife, mother, warrior etched itself in history, not in victory or defeat, but in the naked, unshakable truth of a broken heart.